given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in the business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. So I've been getting a lot of requests about, hey, Gangi, you have any advice for those that are going to be working in a jail? Now, again, my expertise is in a jail. I've worked in state settings. I've worked in prisons. So I have William Young, who does work in a jail. He works out of Nebraska, and I feel he's got some great advice that he's going to share, some tips. And I think also during the dialogue, we can discuss some similarities and maybe some differences along the way. Hey, Will, what's up, man? It's been a while. How's everything going with your book?
It's going good, Anthony. It's in the final stages, the home stretch, and it should be available first or second week in December. I'm shooting for December 13th, so sometime between now and then.
All right, now, if somebody wanted to get your first book, how do they get it? Home Becomes a Housing Unit.
Jump on Amazon. Just type in "When Home Becomes a Housing Unit" or William Young, and it'll be available. And then the second book should be available for pre-order in just a few days.
And Will, you mind just in general introducing yourself again?
Yeah, I'm William Young. I am Anthony Gangi's understudy, and I'm a correctional officer. I've been a correctional officer 16 years, and I started writing about the profession and the effects it can have on us. So fortunately, like our friend here, published author with Anthony is soon to be as well, and then an amateur podcaster. So trying to spread the message of mental health and the importance of correctional officers and the role we play in society.
Yeah, big fan of what you do, Will, because you're telling people that work in corrections that their existence matters.
Right.
And that's a very powerful message for us. Now, guys, this is going to be a good dialogue. So if you are getting ready to work in jail, or maybe if you are, you're already in a jail, you have some experience, I still think there's some stuff here that we can provide you, or maybe some stuff that you could agree with, if you will. But we're going to definitely discuss what it's like to work in a jail, do some tips, and maybe I can intercede a little bit with some prison knowledge. I'm here to learn too today, Will, so help me out. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor, and then we're going to take a trip into a jail. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description. All right, and we're back. So, Will, you got about 16 years. Have you ever worked in a prison?
I have not. I've had the fortunate experience to tour the prisons in our local area because I do a lot of cross training with those guys, but I've never actually worked inside of one.
Well, on the surface, before we dive deep, in the tours, or maybe when dealing with a state CO or a federal CO, someone that's working inside the prison, do you see any immediate differences or similarities?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the mentality is a little bit different because when they get to prison, they take more ownership. The inmates take more ownership of it. It's like their home, right? And so it feels a little bit heavier, if you will, than at our place. I mean, they get settled in there, they work there, they go to school there. I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of things. It's almost like coming into their community from a guy who works at county jail. Coming into that, there's a lot more freedom, if you will, in the prison system than in the county jail system, from my experience. And so then that's a little bit different when you're talking, disciplining and even freedom of movement and things like that with the inmates.
What about the staff mentality, like the prison officers versus the jail officers that you know? Is there a difference in mentality or work professionalism, if you will?
No, not in the two groups. I mean, I get a lot of shit from the prison officers saying, "Oh, you're just a county guy, right? You're just county," and they have that mentality that the stuff that they do is a lot more difficult. But no, the hard work, the loyalty to the profession, the pride when they put on their uniform, in my experience at least, both groups have a ton of it.
Now, I know with the jail, the inmates are coming in, going through that intake, so there's a lot of unknowns. I would like to think that if we had great communication between the jails and the prisons, a lot of the concerns you guys at the jail level will discover, and then hopefully that information forwards its way to the prison system or to where the intake of the prison system will be before the inmate gets distributed across the state. But, what are some of the unknowns that you may see at a jail that you may not necessarily see in a prison?
Well, just from the initial intake of an inmate when he comes off the street, right? We have is the guy, how he's behaving, or the girl, how they're behaving right now. And again, they're coming off the street, so they're on whatever drugs they were taking. Maybe they're drunk, maybe they're fired up from whatever incidents happened, and we don't know anything about them, about their history, about how they're going to behave inside. And so we take them in. And then we have, 10 months, 2 weeks, some of the guys are in our system for, several years, 5-6 years, fighting their case, trying to get it thrown out or whatever, that we then can learn about their behaviors. And some of the guys, by the time they get to that point where they're going to prison for some of their crimes, have been in and out of our facility for, decades. And so you really know, I mean, we can have an individual that comes in off the street and he's drunk and belligerent, and we know that all we have to do is throw this guy in a room for 24 hours and he'll be a trustee tomorrow. I mean, that kind of thing. And so on the onset of our relationship with this individual, we're just trying to discover what they are, who they are, and how they're going to be inside, because these guys are a lot different inside than they are outside, guys and girls. We all take kind of the role, and they fit into the system however they fit in. So outside they could be, on the street, a lunatic, or have this, very violent reputation. But then when they get inside and they're away from all those elements, they're none of those things. And so it does. And I even have some of the feedback from the population of how, they're almost thrown off if they've done a lot of time in prison in other states. They come to our facility. They're like, man, this is like kind of the Twilight Zone. This is not how these guys will behave in prison. They won't interact with the people they're interacting with. They won't even talk to you the way they're talking to you. They're not going to talk to the officers in prison the way they're talking to you guys. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I think what happens in the prison, just one slight difference, is the inmates become more conditioned to the system at that point. So by the time we get them, they're very familiar with how to maneuver, and basically the presence of the uniform really doesn't have that effect as it may have at a jail level, because that could be when they're introduced to the system. But also the routines may be different. I think there's something totally different when, like, at the prison level, we kind of know how long the inmate's going to be there, so we could do programs and stuff like that kind of fit within that range of time, and really, have the inmate hopefully directed to where they need to be. Where in the jail cell, a little bit indeterminate, right? You don't know how long you're going to have, and you kind of have to structure activities as opposed to programs, or it's a little different, right, to develop a routine.
No, it is. We have our routine, and thankfully, one of the things that we've done in the last few years, our facility, is we've started that programming. So if you come into our facility and you don't have a GED, and you're eligible to be, you're at the security level to where you can participate, you go and we get you your GED. So we kind of start that programming that will then be carried on wherever they go. If they go home, it bridges with the community. If they go to prison, they can roll right into the stuff that they got there. But you're right. Once they get to where they're going, they know too, right? They're like, okay, I got to do 10 years, or I have to do 5 years, or I have to do 3.5 years. When they're in our facility, it's kind of a limbo. It's like, I have court in 3 months. It may go good and I may go home, or I may go to prison for 20 years. I don't know yet. And so kind of as the court date gets closer and situations happen inside, their moods kind of shift a little bit based on how they're feeling, what their lawyer said, and things like that. So.
And also the mentality of the inmate. I think a lot of them in the jails are trying to work on their case, trying to figure out what they need to do with their life in case they do go to prison. In the prison, I think they've kind of gotten accustomed, like, this is going to be my life. This is where I'm going to be. Does that affect their interactions with staff, do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's definitely a difference between inmate and convict in our place. We can tell the gentlemen that have spent, or the ladies that have spent a lot of time in prison, interact with the officers when they need to. I mean, and they actually give us less grief than the inmates that are staying for a short period of time, or that maybe are very new in their career, in corrections. And so, and you'll get some blowback. I'll see some of those kids get blowback from the older folks that have done some time. That'll be like, if I'm going in and I'm asking the inmates, hey, I need you guys to quiet down, or I remember years ago I broke up this huge dice game, and it was one of those deals where I was going to confiscate it. Everybody goes about their business and be done. And I said, hey, let me get those dice. And one kid kind of got an attitude, you're always honest about. And one of the older guys said, hey, kid, just give him the dice. Give him the dice. He's going to move on, and that's going to be the end of it. So the attitude is very much, the guys that have been in prison understand what the repercussions are. They understand that we're there to do the job, and if they can make us work the least amount possible, then we stay out of their way, kind of thing. You know what I mean? That's kind of the tone of the interactions there.
When someone asks me what I feel is more dangerous, jail or prisons, I kind of say they both have their dangers. I say, but I kind of, this is very generalized statement here, but right. I think the jail is more about the unknown, and I think the prison is the overknown. You know what I mean? Like in the jail, you're facing a lot of unknowns of staff. Like, who is this person that just came in? What are they about? What are they bringing in? Where the prison is a little bit different because the inmates get to know the system a lot more. They get to know staff and they maneuver. It's just a little bit slower. But again, that familiarity and basically being able to understand how the system moves better than some of our staff does pose a serious threat. So I think, and again, obviously what's in the middle is we're still dealing with the same inmates. I mean, I believe you mentioned it too, that, the inmates that are dangerous out of prison, are definitely starting their career at the jail, so the danger's there. But I mean, in your opinion there, I mean, for you, would you consider one job more dangerous than the other, or would you say they both have their concerns?
Well, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say that I think you're right. I think they both have their concerns. But when I walk a yard, it's extremely unnerving for me, because the guys that we have in our system that are, that assault staff that we have in our segregation unit, guys that only come out in full restraints. But when they go to prison, eventually they work their way off of that, or the prisons have different standards of what they consider segregation. So when I go and I tour a prison and I'm walking around and I'm interacting with people on the yard that were in chains when they left my facility, it's a little different. And in prison, the movement's more free than it is at our facility. So, I come around a corner and there's a guy that, that was never walking freely in our facility. So for me, even though I have 16 years correctional experience, when I go into a new facility or a prison setting, it's a lot different. It feels to me heavier, if that makes sense. And maybe it's just because I'm so used to my facility. And I've toured other facilities throughout the country, and I kind of get that same, like, you're scanning the room, right? You're looking, you're like, okay, look at that guy there. I don't know that guy. There's a blind spot over there. So maybe that has a little bit to do with it. But I really think that that for me, the prison setting, because you're talking about going into somebody's home, their cell, they're taking more ownership of that than they do maybe in a county jail. But then and so that's the most grief I get from like the state guys, right? They're like, well, you're just a county guy and blah, blah, blah. But all the guys that go through, the guys and gals that go through, end up in prison, all go through us first, right? And so if they bust me in the nose in county jail or punch me in the nose in prison, you're still going to get blasted in the nose, right? But it does seem to me, at least in my experience, that the level of violence that takes place in a prison versus jail seems to be a little bit higher, just because maybe when they're in the county jail system, there's still that hope of getting out. There's still that lighter mood of hope, if you will, maybe. I don't know. It's a weird way to put it, but long rambling answer for a short question. But they're both, to me, extremely dangerous. But for me, the prison is less settling than my place.
Yeah, it's unique that you said that. I think what I like about your answer, and I will agree. But again, we're not the catch-all, say-all, so maybe people have some comments they can add to this. But maybe the prison has more interaction with the inmate population. I mean, staff maybe, because again, they're out and about more, and and they're probably there longer. I mean, again, you guys get the frequent flyers, them. But at the prison center, this is like straight up 10, 15 years, and it could be the same officer on that unit dealing with that same inmate for 10 or 15 years nonstop, granted. But yeah, I think the interactions matter.
Well,
a lot.
let me touch on that. So here's the difference with the interactions, right? And I'm the same way. So I have seen the same guy come in and out, even if they go to prison for 4 or 5 years, 10 years, they come back. I reckon there was just a guy booked in the other night that I haven't seen since 2010. He went to prison. I mean, the difference is he's this wide now, right? Because he's been working out every day. So, and I still go in and I interact with the guys, and because we're direct supervision. So you go in there and you interact, but it almost operates like a smaller city, right? And so there's not necessarily your isolated neighborhoods, if you will. It's not like you go into a housing unit and all the African Americans are hanging out together, all the Northern Mexicans are hanging out together, et cetera, and and all the white guys are doing whatever they do, mill about. But in our facility, when that happens, then it's a sign like shit, something bad's getting ready to happen. Normally, you have little pockets, but for the majority of the interactions, they're interacting with each other, they're interacting with us. So there's not necessarily that divide like I've heard about and seen in the prison setting necessarily.
Well, also, I also think maybe from just the inmate perspective, I mean, they may not necessarily know the people that they're with. I mean, they could. Counties are small, but like in bigger areas, maybe they don't. Maybe they've heard but the point is, I think in the prison setting, you're there for a little bit longer. So you may have, even the inmates may have more interactions with each other and then get to know who each other is and then kind of build whatever that relationship would be, positive or negative. One of the things you mentioned before the show, and I thought this was really spot on, which is diversity in a jail, in a prison. This could actually hit both worlds. But if you're an officer and, again, let's say you live a lifestyle that is not as open to cultural differences, and now you're being put into a situation where you have to have these forced interactions with a diverse crew, what advice would you give for someone that may have to be dealing with this for the very first time? So just, if I may, just to kind of sum it up the way you had it before, where, maybe from your suburbs, this is the first time you're going to be interacting with people from the inner city that could be representing gang cultures or, criminal nature. I mean, what would you recommend?
Well, I'm glad you put that. I was worried about how to put that, but essentially what I was saying is, how does a suburbanite, a white boy, go into or an African American, a Hispanic who has kind of lived in this bubble, right? Which doesn't happen, I guess, maybe as much, maybe it does, I don't know, but go into a diverse culture, and then kind of a skewed perception of what that culture is, right? So if you don't have a lot of experience in African American neighborhoods, cultures, being around large groups, going into a housing unit could be, I mean, you could be like, whoa, what's going on here? I remember like my second or third day, I walked up to a younger African American kid sitting in the day room, and he was tapping his head, tap tap. I mean, I watched him for a long time hitting his head, and I'm like, is this like a twitch? Is this a mental health thing? No, his braids itched. You know, so something as silly as that. You know, he's like, I'm just itching my head and I can't scratch it or they'll come out, so I'm just tapping my head. And so something as silly as that, I'm like, oh, okay. So then moving forward, when I would watch people braid their hair, you know, or I mean, it just, you know, little things like Hispanics in jail stick together like a family. Like as soon as you get in, they swarm the inmate coming in, they're giving them stuff, you know, they're taking care of each other. And you know, if you mess with one of them, unfortunately you have more than one person to mess with. So things like that, you learn language differences. You know, they have those silly cultural diversity classes that you take or whatever, where people are like, you know, white people act like this and black people act like this. But there's a little bit of truth in that because, you know, just something as simple as looking somebody in the eye. You know, there's certain cultures that take that as a sign of disrespect. If you're staring somebody right in the face, there's certain cultures that, you know, that want you when you're addressing somebody to look somebody in the face. So those are all kind of things that you need to know and need to be aware of and ask questions. I mean, don't be afraid to walk around and talk, but it can really, and I think this even translates out into the street, Anthony, and this is what I was thinking about. If you take a gentleman who's from the suburbs and he hasn't had a lot of interaction with minorities, and then his first patrol is in a minority neighborhood, you know, and he sees a bunch of people on the corner or in the day room or in the yard hanging out, being loud, being rambunctious, jumping up and down, he may think, shit, something's going on. Well, no, it's not. They're just hanging out. That's what, you know, that's, I don't want to say, every way I try to say this, it sounds bad to me, but that's just how, especially inside, people behave. And so if you're unaware of that, it could be startling, or even just the way some people communicate, you may see that as being disrespectful, but that's not what they're doing. That's not how they're coming across. And so I think that leads to a lot of our communication issues. So I know I rambled a little bit, but try to learn as much about the different cultures and religions and, you know, races and, sexual orientations. I mean, all of that comes into play when you're dealing with a population of people that you had no experience with whatsoever going into this profession. And especially in a county jail, because you go into one housing unit and they're everywhere. I mean, it's just, you're going to meet people that you didn't know exist. That's why I love jail. I love jail because it's the only place where you can get people that grew up in rich neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods, and you Catholics and Muslims and Satanists and football fans and all this, and you shove them all in a room and you force them to communicate and cohabitate, and it's fantastic. It's a fantastic dynamic.
No, you know what? It's a great learning experience. I agree 100%, because obviously it's also things that you can take with you on the outside. I remember a while ago, now mind you, I've worked in obviously very diverse environments as well inside the prisons. My first career, I started off with females. So, I mean, you know, the females, the diversity, I mean, it was just totally a 180 for me. But having said that, I took that as a chance to learn. And sometimes when I'm outside, you know, maybe let's say hanging out the mall, and I see this interaction with like, let's say an officer, you know, a street cop, and like a group of individuals, I don't get involved, obviously. It's not my place to get involved. But for some reason, I'll be like, okay, that's not the way to approach it.
Right.
You know, and I know it's crazy. I'm not bad mouthing cops because they're extra. Please don't take it the wrong way. But I think just working in the prison and the environment, we also don't realize the skill that we wind up collecting passively. And then when you start listening to your inner gut, it's like, that's going to blow up. And it does. And
right.
I'm with my wife. I'm like, I knew that. Why? Because I dealt with, you know, similar situations, if you will. And what I find is that this approach will be better. And that's just based on my experience, where certain things that the officer was saying became more challenging to the individual, as opposed to on trying to de-escalate. And that's kind of where our gift is, in that de-escalation. One of the things you also mentioned that you wanted to discuss was about the mental health of the staff. And I think we can also touch on both of this from both levels, the prisons and the jails. But you got into, this is your mission, man.
Right.
Your mission, you've written books on it. You got a second book coming out possibly mid-December. First book, When Home Becomes a Housing Unit. Definitely something that's very relatable to the field of corrections. People can get that book right now. This is your mission. So what is it that you learned in the jails that you figure right now will hit the mental mindset of individuals who are just not prepared for that environment?
You have to take the threat to your mental health, your emotional well-being as seriously as you take a threat to your physical safety. Because if you are unprepared for, look at what we just talked about. Think of how stressful being thrust into an environment full of people that for lack of a better word, is an alien planet. And they're behaving differently. They're speaking differently. There's a different sort of politics that are inside. And just that anxiety of going up to somebody and asking them to do, to clean their room for the first time. And if you have that communication barrier, I mean, there's a lot of stress. There's a lot of things that chip away. And that's not even talking about the fights and the yelling. And one of the things that drive me crazy is they have these flip-flops that they wear and they get wet. They wear them in the shower, their shower shoes, they wear them in the shower, and they have to bang these things out all the time. They slap them against the tile. Bam, 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 bam. I mean, in the beginning, that's pretty jarring. You're like, holy crap, why do they keep doing that? So you have to, and that's why one of the things I'm so thankful for my facility, we teach corrections fatigue to new hires now. I've been able to do it the last 3 classes because they understand that if you change the oil in a car when you're supposed to, you don't have to fix a blown engine later, right? And so that's how you got to look at this. It sounds silly for a new officer. They're coming in, they've been doing their push-ups, drinking their protein shakes, they're all excited, the boots are shiny, and they don't believe in that kind of stuff. However, just like you train, putting the handcuffs on, you train when you talk to an inmate to keep your hands up, you need to focus on the other stuff too, taking care of your emotional well-being, your psyche, because you get 15 years down the road, 5 years, 3 years down the road. And if you haven't taken that seriously, the job will force you to take it seriously because something will catch up with you.
And at that time, you won't recognize what it is.
Right.
I agree. I think part of the stuff that I've taken from you over the years that we've known each other is identify when you have a concern and admit you have a concern. And everything else we can work with. But if you don't identify it, if you don't admit to it, then we can't help you. How can you?
And that's what I want to say. It's easy to say, okay, I got assaulted, I got stabbed, I got stomped, whatever it is. Okay, yeah, so that bothers me, right? And I understand that because of this incident here, that I have some issues, but that's it's even, Anthony, it's even less than that. It's scarier than that. It's years of those perceived threats, living under that constant violence can take place at any time. It's years of walking through an open yard or a day room where you're surrounded by the inmate population and your spidey sense is just like, boop, 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 what's going on? You got guys, you try to keep people in front of you, but you have guys walking behind you. And that each interaction, each adrenaline dump changes you just a little bit. And so the dangerous thing, the scary thing is years down the road, you're pissed off, you're anxious, you're fighting with your spouse, your kids, and you don't understand why, because you think nothing has ever happened to you. And that's why I named my book, can I say the name of my book, second book? It's called The Nothing That Never Happened. And it's about those tiny little non-incidents, those things that you don't report in your facility, the things that you don't think have any effect on your life, but they actually do. They actually catch up with you. And it's just like that, the basis of corrections fatigue. Over time, that constant loading and unloading of stress and pressure creates these tiny little cracks that just collapse who you are before you started.
You know, one of the concerns I realize is that inmate suicides do affect staff, much as people think it doesn't. It does. We know it. And, you know, especially in jail, I'm sure you get a lot because you have the inmates that at one point may realize that, okay, it's done. I'm going to get sentenced. Hope is gone. Because I'm sure a lot of these lawyers, because they want that money, they give these inmates these false hopes. We're going to get you out. We're going to do this. So they're on a high. And then the moment the world spins and that lawyer who they've been connecting to give them that, I'm going to make it through, now all of a sudden says, hey, you're looking at 10 to 15 years. This person not wanting to transition to a prison will decide to take their own lives. And what people don't realize is staff gets affected by that for many reasons, whether it's just, you know, I had a job to do and I failed, or maybe I knew the inmate professionally, or, hey, you know, who wants to see that? You know, right. Regardless of what the person did, who wants to see that? And I think people downplay that a lot because they think that they're not supposed to feel a certain way. And we're human, guys. It's a life. I mean, regardless of what the person did, you're still going to feel a certain way because it's a human life that's in front of you that no longer exists, which will automatically bring you back to your mortality, you know, your existence. Happens to the best of us. You know, you asked, we asked a good question. I posted it on my Facebook page, got about close to 100 responses. I did it earlier today about, do you think it's in staff's best interest to know the crimes of the inmates they oversee? Now, you asked that was one of the things you wanted to cover in today's topic. So what I was going to do was just to have a little fun feedback here. I was going to read some of the comments off real quick, just a few. Okay. And then I want to get your thoughts because I do have thoughts on this. And guys, be honest with you, this is great because obviously if you're entering the jail or the prison, this is a question that people ask. And it's, are you able to do your job knowing what the inmate's done? I think in the jail, there may be a good chance you're going to know it more because they're coming in. Where in the prison, they're already there. You know, so it may not be, you know, unless you're willing to take a look at it. But I think in the jail, you have to because you're processing them in. Where in the prison, I have to make the effort. I have to look them up. I have to find out what they are. So one is, it's part of my job. I'm going to know it. The other is, I'm really making the effort. So I may have to ask myself why I'm making that effort, you know? So a couple of comments I thought was unique was Jeff Keenan said, work in the county my whole career. It was too easy to check their charges. Plus, if they had to be segregated for their offense, we knew what they were in for. So we did know. You just can't be biased against it. Hillary says, it's not a good idea to know. Too many times it makes staff view them as non-human. The only thing we need to know is if they're an escape risk staff, assault, hostage taker, or can slip through their restraints. Security concerns she's talking about in general. Dee Lee says, yes, because you got to know for assaults for staff. You know, like to know, you know, in case there's security concerns. So same thing. Eric says, I'm going to read about a few more and then we'll go to you. Eric says, I like to know what the people I'm surrounded by are capable of. It keeps me from getting too comfortable with them. There only been 1 in 5 years that rattled me. I can still maintain my professional bearing, but he creeped me out. And then Heather said, yeah, but we also held court at the facility I worked for. So if you don't know that someone had a sex crime charge and put them in a court cell with others, then, well, then you're not doing your job technically, because that's part, she's saying that's part of her job. I wanted the couple people that said no, it's not our job to judge. Treat them all the same and never let your guard down. And then, of course, the argument back and forth now is for the people that are saying no is the response is going to be, but you're professional. Don't be biased in their treatment. So now we have two extremes. I see the middle ground because it was presented there, but I really want to get your thoughts because it's your question.
It was the best piece of advice that my uncle did 27 years in the county before I got there. I came in the twilight of his career, but he said, don't look at their charges. Now, there's obviously situations where you have to know. Yes, classifications will know that they need to be housed in a certain area, right? This person has a keep separate, or this person is a house alone, rec alone, or whatever. I mean, that's the thing. But like you said, Anthony, why are you searching this out? Why are you looking at? So here's what I do. I don't look. At 16 years in, I'm going to be honest and say that still, when I find out why a person's in there, sometimes it still gets me. Now, again, I get it. We're professionals, right? But dealing with an individual, he's getting rowdy, he's being disrespectful. I may look to see if he's in there for assaulting an officer. I may look to see if he's in there for a domestic violence or terroristic threats or something like that, yeah, I may go look for that. I want to know before our interaction gets any crazier. Does this guy have a history of assaulting officers? Does this guy, so I agree with all those things. I don't think I need to know what they're in for to do my job effectively. Eric said he wants to know what the people around him are capable of. I would just ask him, what is he capable of if he was in a similar situation? And the answer should be, you treat them all like walking time bombs, right? Respectfully. But at any time, man, humans are capable of some crazy, crazy things, right? So just because a person is in here for, going to prison for a DUI, doesn't mean that they're necessarily any less dangerous, because now you've put them in a weird situation. You put them in a cage. Maybe they're getting all this pressure. Maybe they're getting assaulted. Maybe you have no idea what's going on in somebody's head. And so in a county jail, it's the exact same way, right? Their charges may be misleading. Okay, so I got a guy for a concealed weapon and whatever, driving under suspension. Okay, well, so all of a sudden now this guy gets worked up. There's an argument, and he damn near kills an inmate. Well, a person's never a murderer till they're a murderer, right? I mean, they escalate. We see an escalation in their crimes. I can trace a guy back from, hey, I started coming in, for shoplifting, and now we're doing armed robbery, and now we're in here for murder. So that potential was always in that person. And so I just say, I treat them, I start our relationship, because that's what it is, a working relationship. We're community policing, back in the 50s or whatever, with how they behave and how they interact with me. If they're respectful, then we're respectful, and we kind of see how this relationship with this individual is going to go versus this one. Their charges very rarely come into play, even sex offenders, because there's no 5-year-old girls inside county jail. I mean, they may be, if they're a jerk when they're in there, then you still have to be professional. So can you treat a guy professionally who's a jerk, which we do all the time, right? This person's yelling at us, screaming at us, and you have to be honest with yourself. Does it change your demeanor, your behavior, if you found out that this individual is a jerk who rapes kids, or is an inmate who's complaining? He's complaining about everything. He does all this, and then all of a sudden you figure out that his crime was, okay, so yeah, he's in there for murder. Okay, good. Yeah, you're talking to a murderer, whatever. But then what you find out is that he murdered African-American just because he's African-American. Now, does that change how you interact with him? Of course it does, because the things that these people do to each other are crazy. It's not how me and Anthony behave. It's not how your listeners, your viewers behave, right? Otherwise, we'd be on the other side of the wall. So you have to look at that and say, can I still effectively do my job knowing these charges? And like you said, Anthony, and I like that you said it, why do you want to know? Is it I have to know to keep this person safe, to keep myself safe? Or are you kind of, and you got to be honest, are you treating them differently after you found out their charges? Okay, this guy's a jerk with you. Oh, and he's a pedophile. Okay, well, I'm not going to get him that thing that he needs, or I'm not, even though I would for somebody else, I'm going to get him, he wants new pants. He needs new pants. Well, I'm going to get him a size smaller, or I'm going to get him a size bigger. There are things that happen like that. And so that's why you just eliminate it by just not even knowing, not even caring. I don't care.
Yeah, I like what you said about sometimes what they're in for is very misleading, because people, kind of in my book about manipulation, the part of the book really expresses the power of the situation that has control over people. Most of the time you look at the person, but you eliminate the situation. The situation is key in regard to how the person is going to react. So you're right. You don't know if somebody's a threat until they become a threat. And then you have to go back and what caused it? Well, it's environmental factors that, push the person to get to that point. And for me, when I started in the prison system, I would interact with inmates every day. My curiosity would find myself on the internet, kind of doing just surface level searches. But then eventually it got old. Crime started blending in, and Not that I minimize what they've done, but because I don't. But at the end of the day, in order for me to be fair and treat people, fair, firm, and consistent, you really can't say one crime is less than the other in order for you to be fair. Now, I know morally, yes, guys, don't get me wrong. But the hardest part about doing our job is to be professional when you're dealing with crimes that have hit home at you a little bit. But that's why this job isn't for everyone.
Well, let me give you. Sorry, go ahead.
That's something that people, take for granted. There's a skill, there's a finesse to be able to be professional with someone who's committed those crimes, especially when you yourself have a kid that could have been a target, But now if I'm going to look at those crimes as a way to, deal with how I'm going to treat that individual, then technically that's not the right reasons for looking at that crime. And the reason I was going to ask you before you go into your comment was, I'm thinking at the jail level, one of the differences is that a lot of the officers are going to probably know more about what that individual did because they're in the process. They're new, and I'm sure a lot of you guys are involved in the intake process where you know what their crimes are. And people, hey, you saw that guy I just got today? He did this, this, and this. Where at the prison, we get them by bulk every day. They're already sentenced. We're just housing them, and they kind of just blend in. I come in one day, I got 49 inmates in my unit. I come in the next day, I got 60 inmates. I'm not going to, go back and check the other 11 to see what they've done. They're just part of the system. They're already in, and, the hard work's already done, unless I'm classification. But again, classification's interaction with the inmate is not going to be as plentiful as it would be for an officer on the floor. But what were you going to say? But do you agree with the one thing I'm saying about the jail officers possibly knowing more about what the inmate did than the state officers?
Oh, we absolutely know, because when we come in and we drop an inmate off at a housing, we give them this piece of paper that has all their information on it, and it has their current charges on it. And so you hand it to the officer, and the officer, has an opportunity to look. We can pull it up on the system. I mean, you absolutely know. And the inmates will practice their cases on us. They'll come up and they'll say, hey, I can't believe it. I was just sitting in my living room and I was watching Cops on Saturday night, and the feds kicked in my door and busted me for ghosto. Well, okay. So they told you the story. So you start to look and you're like, yeah, no, this guy's been a drug dealer for 25 years, So yeah, we know. I mean, if you've been there long enough, you know the interaction. But what I was going to tell you, and an extra layer of a reason why not to know, is I had a gentleman in there that like Eric made me. He triggered me. Eric triggered me. So I got something in my eye too. I'm not crying. So, but Eric triggered me when he said there was one individual that creeped me out, because I've had a couple of encounters with guys that I felt were truly evil, and one of them killed a little girl. He left her in the woods to be found at a later date. My interactions were, he was extremely professional with male staff, courteous with male staff, not so much with the female staff, but with male staff. And so our interactions were like, hey, Officer Young, did you get the score of the Laker game last night? Hey, Officer Young, can I get a second cup of coffee for breakfast in the morning? Things like that. Like I would call you up and say, hey, Anthony, how you doing today, buddy? And in my head, I was thinking, you murdering piece of shit. Who cares about the Lakers game? I mean, you're like a terrible person, That didn't change my interaction with him. I was still very professional. We still had a back and forth. In fact, that came into play later when I had to break up a fight with him. He because of our relationship, he didn't attack staff. But what that does, though, is creates a moral injury. Is creates how I feel about a situation, and I force myself to not feel about that situation, not treat it individually different. Those are the things that I'm talking about that catch up with you later down the road. And that's why I think it's important to not look at those kind of things. I don't watch the news, right? My wife will yell from the kitchen, hey, did you know so-and-so? I'm like, yeah, is he dead? Yeah, he died. He got shot last night. Okay. I don't want to see, and that's the other dynamic, Anthony. We have TVs in our units. And so the guys will be sitting there watching the 9 o'clock news. And then all of a sudden I got a guy coming into my housing unit that was just on the 9 o'clock news for doing whatever he did. Right. And so I'm like, oh, well, hi, yeah, I know all about you. Come on in, so, or the inmates will say, hey, that dude was just on the news. He's not coming in here, so, I mean, You do, but I caution you for your sanity later on down the road to just treat them the way that they, professionally interact with them based on, whatever working relationship you have with that individual while they're at your facility in the county jail, passing through years, 10 years, whatever. And do it that way. Don't worry about their charges unless it's a need to know thing, because it will catch up with you.
Right. Now, before we come to a close, I just want people to mention that some of the differences that we talked about definitely is the unknown, in which the jails try to figure things out before hopefully they're sent over to the prison. Obviously, jails are less than a year or more state. But I also want to mention something for the people that work out in the jails. They do collect a lot of intel, even gangs that they do pass over to the prisons that are able to help us maneuver. But I feel that sometimes the jail trial by error, because maybe the inmate doesn't want to admit that at that time at the jail. But eventually it's going to get to that point where the prison, where you guys have done your work. I would like to think that your connection with the municipality is probably a little bit closer than at a state level. And again, the importance of that intel passing over to us. So you guys kind of pioneer a lot, and then hopefully craft the path for us that when we take the inmate, we know exactly what to move her. And that goes on all angles. We're not just talking about safety and security, we're talking about medical as well, mental health. I mean, these inmates probably have never even seen medical. I've been diagnosed with AIDS first, and then now medical is starting to kind of, track something. And hopefully that information gets passed over to the prison. So you guys introduce the inmate into the system, obviously, or the arrestee, if you will, into the system, and then you guys start the paperwork that's going to help us find some level of consistency. So you guys have to maneuver through that inconsistency to help the state find a path. Hey, Will, you have anything you want to say in closing?
Yeah, first, I just want to thank you, Anthony, for having me on. I love, it's like a dream come true hanging out with you, talking to you. You have a terrific platform, and you're doing the correctional profession such a service. I just can't even put it into words, man, which is weird because I talk a lot. But you, my friend, if they did a Mount Rushmore of correctional officers, you should be the first head that they carve into that rock. I love you, brother. I appreciate everything you do, man.
Wait, hold on, because I believe it or not, I'm very emotional. I'm very emotional, man. I get that way. I'm an emotional person, so that meant the world to me. For someone like yourself to recognize my hard work, you yourself being a pioneer for officers' mental health. So I appreciate that, and obviously I appreciate you. It's always a pleasure having you come on. I know you got some more in closing. You got some books out there. Come on, man. Let's get that plug in there.
I have 2 books. I'm going to show you one. Here you go. Look. Let me do the white balance here. When Home Becomes a Housing Unit, it's on Amazon, and it's all about what we've been, some of the emotional things I've talked about. When your job follows you home, when the things that we're talking about follow you home. My next book that'll be available for pre-order at the latter part of the week is called The Nothing That Never Happened. And these are books that are written for correctional staff and then their families, right? So my goal is to give you an example of, hey, I had this terrible fight with my wife. It's totally because I'm an asshole and I haven't been dealing with the things that I've been experiencing in work, the trauma, the adrenaline, the changes to my body, my personality. So I'm going to give you this story, and I want you to read it, and I want to put you in my living room, because our experiences, whether it's a county jail, whether it's a prison system, whether you've been there 2 years, 10 years, 15 years, whether you work in South Africa or Minnesota, they're the same stories. We have the same stressors. We have the same job. And so my goal is to say, hey, look, you're not alone. The things that are going on with you, the changes, could be directly related to the things that you witness inside. And here's how you handle some of that. And for some of us, big tough guys, tough girls, we can't communicate that with our loved ones. We don't know how to say that. Sometimes we don't even know what's going on. So my hope is that my book not only shows the staff member that, hey, yeah, there may be something going on, but they could give it to their wife or their husband or their children or their neighbor. I gave a copy of my book to my neighbor and said, here, if I'm ever, acting funny or sitting on my porch, not saying anything, this is why. And it helps, man. I've had so many comments, so many emails from officers all over the world that says, hey, I wish I would have had this book 20 years ago. I wish I would have known. In fact, you sent me that message last week, and I connected with that lady. It was awesome. Made my day. They don't give us these tools when we start the academy, right? We talk about how to protect ourselves physically. And so my goal is to give you these emotional tools and these stories, these antidotes that say, hey, yeah, this is a real thing, and hopefully it helps, man. Hopefully it extends your career. Hopefully it makes your quality of life, with your relationships and stuff better. So yeah, I do that. And then I have my podcast. Anthony, you've been a guest on the podcast, the Saturday Night Synopsis. I do it live on Saturdays. I've taken a little bit of break so I could finish book 2, but it's going to be rebooted after the holidays. And then I have a couple other podcasts that I am involved in. But the goal is to spread the message that correctional officers are not alone, to hopefully take what Anthony's doing and what Russ is doing on Keepers and Keith and Gary and all these people that are out there being lighthouses, and to be a part of that mission and say, hey, look, if we can all take this seriously, if we can all acknowledge that we're all going through some craziness and none of us are going to survive corrections alone, that we need our brothers and sisters to get through this, to survive this race. And that's what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, what's great is I've had a lot of people comment back on your book through my media outlets. Like I said, I gave the one person, the young lady. And what's great about this is not only do they get so much from your book, but then you're reachable to them, which is what I do too. You have to be reachable to the people that need you. I try my best, and you can ask, like, comment to everybody that comments, messages all the time. I think that's the key. It's not about just writing a book and then disappearing. It's about writing a book and then waiting for that feedback, and then really having some initial investment in the people that read it, that took the time out to hear your story. And the last thing, that I don't want to do is I want to make sure that I'm here for you and that you know that. And I want to ask one more thing before you go. I did you release a cover for your second book? Were you able to? Did you do that publicly or no?
I haven't yet.
Okay, never mind. I don't know if you can.
Yeah. I can.
Can you or no? Did you release it publicly yet? Because for some reason I thought you did a couple of weeks back.
If I did, it was probably after a double shift and I wasn't sure what was going on. But I'm working on making a promo. But let me pull it. Let me scroll through my pictures. I want to show you, because the goal with the first book, When Home Becomes a Housing Unit, was to have a cover for you that punched the correctional officer in the gut. Here, look at this real quick. This is just on my phone.
Right, the eggshell, right.
It's kind of hard to see. So what it is it's Humpty Dumpty, man. And it's what I was talking about with our psyche, our emotional well-being earlier. What happened to Humpty Dumpty? He fell down. He's trying to hold himself together, right? In the children's story, it says all the king's horses, all the king's men couldn't put Humpty Dumpty together again. If all those people were correctional officers, they would be yelling at Humpty Dumpty, telling him to suck it up, get over it. You knew what you signed up for. It's just all part of the job. And here the officer is trying to hold his shit together, trying to get back to work because he's got a family to support, doesn't know what else to do. And so that's the purpose of it. That's kind of the genesis behind the cover. So I hope people like it, man.
And the great thing about, I like the fact that you're using an egg, because a lot of us pretend that we have a hard shell.
Right.
And at the end of the day, we're human.
No, we're all fragile, man. I want to say one more thing. I know that there's a lot of, and you do very good keeping up with your community, and that's what you have here, and it's fantastic. And I want to say that there's a lot of people out there that are helping further the mission. They're out there, they're checking on their staff, they're doing great things. I just want to say this: if you're watching this video, if you're reading, my book or Anthony's book, which is fantastic, by the way, when it comes out, it's fantastic. You guys, 16 years in the game, I'm reading this and I'm like, oh yeah, I wish I would have known that, so it's fantastic shit. So make sure you get that. But if you feel like writing some thoughts down, write some thoughts down. If you're out there and you're talking to staff and you want to check on staff and you're like, I don't know where to start, get a hold of us. Email one of us, email Anthony, comment on this video. We'll help point you in the right direction. We need people like Anthony and Russ and Connie and Katarina and some of the people that I've had on my show all over the world, all over the country. Oh, well, whatever. Yeah, man. Me at the end. I'm like the bat boy of the Tear Talk family, right? That's right. I'm carrying the water. Hey, Anthony, you need a drink? Yeah,
real quick, so people know the reason why Will's a third shifter. So Will had to sacrifice some sleep to share the story today, which obviously appreciate, but he would be on a lot more if it wasn't for the schedule.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's tough. I shave, but only my wife, and for Anthony Gangi do I shave my sleep. So you should feel happy.
I did miss you, man. I've been calling you a lot lately.
And you have, and that's why people look. You watch YouTube, you see personalities out there, and here's the thing, guys. We have people out there in the field that genuinely give a shit and genuinely care about people. And so when this guy says that, he responds, he cares, he does. I mean, if I go dark for 4 or 5 days, he's calling me. He say, "Hey, what's up, dude? Where you at? How's the family?" It's not like, "Hey, I need you to do a video." It's like, "Hey, I haven't heard from you in a couple of days. How you doing?" And that helps me. That puts me back on the rails. And there's all kinds of people all over through this venue and through other venues that do that. So he's setting a great example. Keep touch with your brothers and sisters.
The cool thing is that you could be annoying as long as it's with the foundation of love. Right?
That's right.
I mean, my wife
are you calling me annoying or what?
No, me. Oh, dude, like I get these urges. I've been calling people at the last minute. But again, thank you. This was a request that came my way. But even prior to doing this request, even though I know this is your wheelhouse, your schedule has had some conflict. So I've been trying to get you on for other stuff. But
right.
This was definitely your wheelhouse. I didn't want to have anybody else touch on that. So as always, guys, the show is tipped. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. Stay safe.